Why do both of my sons have the exact same scar I never noticed before? I was helping my younger son Ethan get dressed after his Saturday morning soccer game when I saw it. A thin, white line running diagonal across his left shoulder blade about 2 inches long. I asked him how he got that scar, and he shrugged and said he didn't know, that it had always been there. Something about the shape and position triggered a memory, and I called for my older son Lucas, who was watching TV in the living room. When he came into the bedroom, I asked him to lift his shirt and turn around. There it was, the exact same scar in the exact same location on his left shoulder blade, identical in length and angle and color. My hands started shaking as I stared at both boys standing side by side with matching scars I'd somehow never noticed in their 11 and 9 years of life. I asked Lucas when he got his scar, and he gave me the same answer Ethan had, that he'd always had it and didn't remember any injury. The statistical impossibility of 2 children having identical scars in identical locations from unknown causes made my stomach drop. My wife Rebecca was at her book club and wouldn't be home for another 2 hours, so I was alone trying to process this discovery. I'd given both boys hundreds of baths when they were younger and had seen them shirtless thousands of times. How had I never noticed these scars before? I pulled out my phone and started scrolling through photos looking for any shots that showed their backs clearly. I found several from last summer's beach vacation where both boys were running toward the ocean and zoomed in on their shoulder blades. The scars were visible in the photos, faint but definitely there. I'd looked at these pictures dozens of times and had never registered the marks. I went further back through the photo library, finding images from 2 years ago, 3 years ago, 5 years ago. In every photo where their backs were visible, the scars were present. I'd been blind to something that had apparently existed for years. I asked the boys to sit with me on the couch, and I tried to stay calm while questioning them more thoroughly. Did they remember falling or cutting themselves on that exact spot? Had they been injured at the same time in some accident I'd forgotten? Lucas said he had no memory of any injury to his back, and the scar had just always been there as long as he could remember. Ethan nodded in agreement and said the same thing. I asked if their mother had ever mentioned how they got the scars, and both boys looked confused and said they'd never talked about it. The conversation felt surreal because I was discussing something that should have been part of our family history, but had somehow existed in a blind spot for everyone. I told them to go back to their activities, and I sat alone trying to figure out what I was missing. The scars were too identical to be coincidence. Same size, same location, same appearance. That meant they had to have been caused by the same thing at the same time. I called Rebecca and asked when she'd be home. She said another hour and asked if everything was okay. I told her I needed to talk to her about something strange I discovered about the boys. Her voice shifted to concern, and she said she'd leave early and be home in 30 minutes. I hung up and went back to studying photos, this time looking at baby pictures from when the boys were infants. I found shots from Lucas's first bath at 3 days old and zoomed in as far as the resolution would allow. The scar appeared to be there even then, though it was harder to see on infant skin. I pulled out physical photo albums from the closet and used a magnifying glass to examine pictures more closely. In every image where their backs were visible throughout their entire lives, the scars were present. That meant they'd been born with these marks or had received them very early in infancy before I'd formed clear memories of their bodies. Rebecca came home and found me surrounded by scattered photos in the living room. I showed her both boys' backs and watched her face change from confusion to shock as she registered what she was seeing. She said she'd never noticed the scars before and asked how that was possible. I told her I'd been asking myself the same question for the past hour. We sent the boys to play in their room and sat together going through the same photos I'd already examined. Rebecca kept saying she couldn't believe she'd missed something so obvious for so long. She was their mother and had been far more involved in their daily care than I had been, especially when they were very young. If anyone should have noticed matching scars, it was her. She pulled up photos on her own phone and found the same pattern I had. Scars visible in every image, but somehow never consciously registered. We decided we needed to check the boys' medical records to see if there was any documentation of injuries or procedures that might explain the marks. I called our pediatrician's office Monday morning and requested copies of both boys' complete medical files. And that's when things took a turn I never expected. To see the full story, click the link below or go on my channel.